The world is divided into 4 spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Minds. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Coming up on the show, tensions mount as Greece's current bailout arrangement ends February 28th. Historian and political scientist Eric Toussaint says the Mediterranean country should take unilateral action to deal with its debt. I'll speak with Eric. But first, a look at media news. Reviews have been unfavorable for BBC4's new 3-episode satire series, Asylum. Although most reviews see the show as a clear attempt to parody the situation faced by WikiLeaks founder and editor Julian Assange in Ecuador's London embassy, one of the show's writers denies it is about the insurgent publisher. Writer Peter Bowden has tweeted, "You may see Assange, you're free to see Assange, but that's not what I wrote and you'd be wrong." That's comforting, seeing that Bowden's co-writer for the show, Tom Pipp, wrote in 2012 that London police should drag Assange out of the embassy and shoot him in the back of the head. The first episode of Asylum aired Monday, February 9th. While some reviews avoid passing anything resembling distinct opinion on the show, The Guardian's Julia Rayside writes that she was too busy asking questions to laugh. Writing in The Telegraph, Benji Wilson explained that the show had a half-baked feel, a good idea that, on further inspection, probably doesn't have legs. Pressure is mounting as the February 28th deadline for Greece's current bailout agreement approaches. Greece's new Syriza government is proposing an alternative agreement, while the troika lenders of the European Commission, European Central Bank, and International Monetary Fund are proposing austerity business as usual. Eric Toussaint is spokesman for the Committee to End Third World Debt. He has been working for the abolition of the debts of the southern countries and the illegitimate debts of the northern countries. He joins me to discuss the situation in Greece. Hi, Eric. Welcome to Imaginary Lines.
Hi.
World media are focused on Greek debt. Can you explain how Greece and the EU arrived at this current situation?
The problem began really at the beginning of the year 2000, when Greece entered the Eurozone, and Greece, as other countries like Portugal and Spain, received a lot of loans given by French, German, Belgium, Luxembourgian private banks, big banks. So a huge amount of money reached Greece and Spain and Portugal, etc. But these countries were not really in condition to borrow such amount of money. And the banks, the private banks who gave these loans knew that very well. But they knew also that in case of problem, the European Central Bank will support them and help them and give them money give money to Greece to give back the money to them as private banks. Okay, so in this opportunity was created the Troika, which is composed by the IMF, the European Central Banks, and the European Commission. And the Troika said to Greece, okay, we lend you new money, but you have to use this money to pay back the private banks. And you have to implement a structural adjustment program. So now the Greek debt is around, in dollars, I would say, more than 500 billion. and 80% of this debt is owed to the Troika.
The Greek Syriza government is putting forward an alternative debt plan proposal. What can you tell me about this plan?
They are proposing a European conference to solve the problem of the European debt, to alleviate uh, in a radical way the burden of the debt on Spain, on Italy, on Portugal, on Ireland, on Cyprus, and Greece. And they say, see that after the Second World War, there has been a European conference to reduce drastically the German debt. And the reduction was more than 62% of the German debt, not taking into account the reparation Germany should have paid to the European country invaded by the Nazi regime. So Greece is telling Europe, if it has been possible to do that with Germany, a country which invaded other countries during the Second World War, at least you should do the same thing for the Greek people, because they never caused damage to other countries. And they are living in degradation of the condition of life because the condition and the neoliberal policy imposed by the Troika to the Greek people. But the problem is that the European Commission and the European Central Bank is so neoliberal that they will never accept this legitimate proposal coming from the Greek government. So the conclusion for me is that Greece will have to take unilateral act against the creditors. I think that what Ecuador did in 2007, organizing an audit commission of the debt, of Ecuador debt, and at the end deciding a suspension of the payment of an important part of this debt in November 2008, this experience showed by Ecuador should be a lesson to the Greek government. And I think that the Greek government should do the same as what the Rafael Correa government did in 2007-2008.
Finally, Eric, Greece's new finance minister has made proposals for how the EU can reform to recycle its surpluses and deficits for balanced development. What do you think of his proposal?
Varoufakis' proposal is a very interesting one, but there is no chance to convince the European Commission to implement it. Because what Varoufakis is proposing is exactly what you summarized. He proposed to suspend the, the implementation of victimization of the population of Europe, when in reality, the European Commission wants to keep on with the neoliberal policy, exactly as what happened 30 years and 20 years ago during the neoliberal night, the very large neoliberal night in Latin America in the year 80s and 90s of the 20th century. Now in Europe, we are living the repetition of the experience of the Latin American people 20 and 30 years ago. And the question is, will we will we have to wait for 10 or 15 years to react, or with what is happening in Greece and the victory of Syriza, will we take this opportunity to take a turn and to implement uh, another type of policies? That's the challenge for the European folks.
Thank you, Eric, for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
It was a pleasure. Okay.
And now a look at how English media have reported on Latin America. Earlier this month on his HBO show, Last Week Tonight, comedian John Oliver mocked Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa for responding to critics on Twitter. While the opposition to Correa is reveling in Oliver's mockery of the president, many feel this is yet another example of Western media decontextualizing Latin America. Or was it a display of the different way that Latin American leaders communicate with their constituents? Something that Westerners find easier to mock than to understand. One Canadian immigrant living in Ecuador wrote an open letter to Oliver, stating that Oliver's light-hearted treatment of the subject lacked context. Shannon Rohan wrote that it's refreshing to see a political leader unedited and expressing his emotions, something those in the West are wholly unused to, as their politicians are consistently shrouded behind PR teams. The exchange inspired the Twitter hashtag, John, you are invited, in tweets such as the one from Rocio Perez stating, John, you are invited, a country where every kid goes to school for free. That's it for today's Imaginary Lines. Thanks for watching the show. I'm your host, Chris Spanos. Please join me next week.